Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Oregon's 2023 spring game just wraps up year 2 under Dan Lanning. And before we even talk about what we saw on the field, just want to shout out the Oregon fans. What a phenomenal environment you had. And when you talk about recruiting, you take a look at the recruits who are on campus. That's how you sell guys to come play in Eugene. Like, that is a phenomenal environment. They had a ton of alumni coming back, and the fans absolutely showed out. And I had a blast watching the spring game, but you take a look at the recruits who are on campus to take it in. Elijah Rushing, 5-star edge. David Stone, top 10 national defensive lineman. KJ Bolding, another top 5 national dude at the safety position. Jordan Ross, Colin Simmons, 5-star offensive tackle Brandon Baker. Talk about selling your program to the talented 2024 class. That's absolutely how you do it. Now, before we get into what we saw at the spring game, just want to say thank you to you guys again. The support you guys have shown truly does mean a lot to the fellas. We just hit 5,000 subscribers, and I cannot thank you guys enough for helping us do that. So again, if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Ducks fans, I think it's going to be a busy couple of weeks on the recruiting trail. So stay locked in for that. Now, I want to get to what we saw in the spring game. You look at this Oregon team heading into 2023. I get the Pac-12 is loaded. We talked a lot about USC being a team that's very dangerous heading into 2023. Oregon's just as dangerous. And they have it when you return a guy like Bo Nix, who you might not find many Bo Nix believers like I was last year. Bo Nix is such a talented quarterback. Then you look back at his time at Auburn, no offensive line, couldn't run the football, no wide receivers, playing in the Brian Harsin offense. Like, he was destined to fail, especially when you're going up against some of the dominant SEC defenses you see in that conference. Comes to Oregon, and I was so excited to see what he could do behind a good offensive line that could run the football and some weapons on the outside. And we saw what Bo Nix is capable of. Year 2 at Oregon, I mean, print the shirts. Like, he's a Heisman runner or contender for sure, and one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And you saw Bo Nix. Yes, you have a new offensive coordinator in Will Stein. You saw him still have command of the offense. Like, the ball was coming out on time. And a guy like Troy Franklin, I think, is one of the best. We're just putting out a 2024 mock draft in the next couple of days. I have Troy Franklin going in the top 15. When you talk about receivers who are some of the best in the country heading into the 2023 season, Troy Franklin is at the top of that list. And it's so important to have that quarterback wide receiver battery. You see the teams that win national titles, they have that. When you have an elite quarterback coupled with an elite wide receiver and you need to make a play, having that battery, having that chemistry that Troy Franklin and Bo Nix have and will build on in year 2 is so big. And so Bo Nix looked in command. I thought the Trayshawn Holden get in the transfer portal was phenomenal. I thought he looked really good. Kind of a guy that works more in the middle of the field. You have Troy Franklin, who's got the long speed. He's got the body control to work down the field. Trayshawn Holden's going to catch a lot of footballs over the middle of the field. You have Chris Hudson, who's extremely talented, popped off a little bit. And then Tez Johnson, who's a little smaller. Bo Nix, obviously the family connection there. He's got some serious juice when you get the ball in space, and that's probably the most exciting aspect of this Oregon offense, outside of Bo Nix being one of the best quarterbacks in college football last year, is you have so many guys that if you can just get the ball out quickly, on time to in space, and they can just work after the catch, this offense has so much room to hit those explosive plays. And you even look at the running back room. Bucky Irving, Noah Whittington, 2 of the best running backs from last year, both will be back. Now, I think the biggest question mark you have for this Oregon offense is not Bo Nix. It's not the talent that he's surrounded by. I think it's the offensive line and the protection. When you lose a guy like Alex Forsythe, what do you lose? 3 or 4 offensive linemen who started last year. It was a great group. They ran the football extremely well. How quickly can you rebuild those guys around Bo Nix, or protecting Bo Nix, I should say, and allow, because I don't think people give enough credit. Like, Bo Nix was phenomenal. This Oregon team was mashing other Pac-12 teams on the run, in the run game. And Bo Nix helped with his legs, but that was a phenomenal offensive line, giving space to a lot of really talented running backs. Can this offensive line be as dominant as we saw in 2022 is probably my biggest question mark on the offensive side of the ball. It's not the play calls. It's not Bo Nix. It's this offensive line. And you saw some guys that you're really, like Josh Conley Jr., who, as a Michigan fan, I'm still salty that he's not in Ann Arbor. He's going to be such a good left tackle. I mean, I think he's a future first rounder. He has every single skill set and a skill trait in the book to be that. I think he's your left tackle. You go get a Johnny Cornelius, who had offers from pretty much every Power 5 team coming over from Rhode Island at the right tackle spot. I think you got some really good buck-end tackles, and you saw them going up against some good edge rushers Brandon Dorlus, Mace Funa, Jordan Burch, the transfer from South Carolina. They were holding their own. It's just tough to get a sense of how well this offensive line will be able to move bodies and run the football because they were kind of, you sprinkled in. You had some starters on one team, you had some starters on the other team, and that when you're pulling a lot of offensive linemen like Oregon does, some of that communication and the blocking schemes sometimes breaks down. So you didn't get a feel for how well this offensive line works as a unit. But in terms of pass protection, I thought Josh Conley Jr., Johnny Cornelius, who you didn't have too many answers on. I think you're excited for Josh Conley Jr. I think you see him being kind of an All-American level tackle. I thought they did really well in pass protection for the most part. So it kind of calmed my nerves a little bit in the sense of giving Bo Nix some protection, being able to run the football. This Oregon offense, I think, is going to take off right where it left off, which kind of my eyes were kind of more on the defense. And I thought the defense was way better than it looked in 2022. And I get it's just a spring game, and that inherently kind of favors the defense because you're not really dealing with a ton of the offensive schematics. But what did Oregon struggle mostly with was kind of the basics on the defensive side of the ball. Tackling, rushing the passer, and not giving up the big play. We'll start up front in that front seven. You lose a guy like DJ Johnson, who I was a massive fan of in the draft process. Brandon Dorlus coming back, I don't think gets enough credit for how good he is. Mace Funa was just really active. I would like to shout out Taki Tamani as well from the inside. He was just behind the line of scrimmage consistently. What I'm most excited about, though, is some of the guys who have that big time ceiling. Jordan Burch, the former top 10 national recruit transferring from South Carolina. Dan Lanning has done a phenomenal job developing defensive linemen going back to his time at Georgia. I think that's why Jordan Burch came to Oregon. And if those guys like Jordan Burch or Mateo Yu as a true freshman can kind of unlock all that potential they have with being coached up by Dan Lanning, I think that's where this Oregon defense could be really special. There's kind of two ways to limit those explosive plays down the field through the air, right? One, having a good secondary. And we'll get to those guys who I thought were pretty impressive on the large part today. The second part is getting after the passer, not throwing the quarterback off his spot and being able to create some havoc and not let some of those longer, deeper routes develop. That's what I'm most excited for. Guys like Brandon Dorlus, Jordan Burch, Mateo Yu, can those guys be game wreckers up front and then take a little pressure off the secondary? Because again, you lose a guy like Christian Gonzalez. How well is the secondary going to come in? Now, working just our way back here, the linebackers, I love Noah Sewell. Like, I think he's an extremely fun player. You don't see many guys who are that big and that fast play at the linebacker spot, and he was really fun to watch. Struggled in space, and especially in the conference like the Pac-12, like as good as Noah Sewell was, I think he's like a top 10 pick in 2010 in the Big Ten when it's just the game of football is being played between the tackles in a phone booth. Noah Sewell is a first-round pick in the NFL draft. In the Pac-12 in 2022, you got to be able to cover running backs out of the flat. You got to be able to tackle in space. You got to be able to carry tight ends. Noah Sewell kind of struggled with that. He's not a bad linebacker. I just didn't think that he was a great fit to play linebacker in the Pac-12. What does Oregon do? One, they go get a guy like Justin Jacobs in the transfer portal. The second, which I thought was interesting, and you look at the linebackers now, Jeffrey Bass and Jamal Hill, both former safeties who are coming down. And now what does that do? It allows you to have some athletic linebackers who can go sideline to sideline and tackle in space. I thought Jamal Hill looked phenomenal at that linebacker spot, flashed a bunch, and you see that athleticism in terms of playing in space. The former safety, he's comfortable in space. He's comfortable tackling in space, put on a little weight, and I'm not too concerned about him not being strong enough to stack and shed blocks. I'm more concerned with Oregon's linebackers in terms of playing in space. That's the recipe to win games in the Pac-12. Jamal Hill and Jeffrey Bassa look certainly like they're capable of doing that. You throw in Justin Jacobs, it like Justin Flo, Noah Sewell, they were phenomenal recruits out of high school. I didn't think the play on the field was that great. I'm really excited to see guys like we just named Jeffrey Bass and Jamal Hill be some playmakers who can go sideline to sideline and be active in the Pac-12. Now, the secondary, that's your probably biggest concern. It was a unit that gave up a lot of big plays. You're losing in my mind, the best cornerback from last year in Christian Gonzalez. How does that group look? And you saw Dan Lanning. He had some question marks about that group and goes in the transfer portal and gets three guys who are probably going to start. My first note on this Oregon defense in the secondary is long and fast. Like these guys looked the part of all conference cornerbacks and NFL players. Kyrie Jackson, the former JUCO kid, goes to Alabama. Dan Lanning, no doubt, recruited him out of junior college to come to Georgia during his time at Georgia. Coming in, I love the look of him, right? He's physical. He's got great closing speed. He's got good makeup speed, but he's got that length. And I'm less concerned with the capability of these guys and more just playing disciplined football and not getting beat for the deep ball. Because again, when you look at offenses, especially in the Pac 12, they're going to want to hit the explosive plays. It's really hard for offenses. And we talk about this all the time on this channel to go 12 plays, 80 yards, and score a touchdown. It's a lot easier for those offenses to hit that 50-yard explosive play and go 4 plays, 80 yards, and a touchdown. If Oregon can limit those big explosive plays, make the offense stay on the field longer, turnovers, negative plays, sacks, that's what happens, and that's how you kind of avoid giving up some of those big scoring games that Oregon's defense had in the past. Evan Williams, the transfer, I thought he looked really good. Tasheem Johnson is going to be, I'm interested to see what they do with him because he's a safety. I think they want to play him more in the nickel. We'll see. But he's a guy that lays the boom. He's fast, he's athletic, and he's physical. He's going to be able to tackle in the tackle box. Thought Dante Manning looked pretty good. He gave up one big play, but he also had a couple of really good plays. And then Cole Martin, true freshman, early enrollee. He might play some serious football for Oregon in 2023. He's a competitor, a little bit smaller, still like developing that body in on a lot of tackles, breaking up some footballs. Like this Oregon defense, I think, in a similar conversation that we had with Brent Venables in his first year at Oklahoma, you're going to see this Oregon defense kind of grasp this Dan Lanning scheme a little bit more in 2023. And we've seen it a bunch. Brent Venables struggled with the defense early for Oklahoma in his first year because he didn't really have the personnel that he needed in order to kind of run his defense successfully. Year 2, I think he has that. I think the defense will look better. You saw Michigan in 2021 when they brought in a new defensive coordinator. They had the person the scheme was just kind of hard and there were some growing pains with the scheme. In Dan Lanning's case, I think in 2023, I think the players know the scheme a little bit more. You have more of the bodies that Dan Lanning wants in sense of I want to run my defense like this. We're going to go out and get players like this to run this scheme. That's what's most optimistic about this defense. Because again, I don't think it was the caliber of player, you might say, that struggled with that led to these struggles on defense for Oregon. I thought it was a lot more of the scheme and giving up those big plays and not playing discipline, having guys in the backfield. Year 2 under Dan Lanning, I think they'll clean it up. One other thing, tackling was really good, which is rare to see in a spring game. Again, I've watched a lot of spring games, a lot of missed tackles, a lot of miscues. Oregon limited that. And so you feel pretty confident about just the basics of this Oregon defense and being a lot better in 2023. And you're going to have to be better if you want to win a Pac-12 because you're going up against Michael Penix from Washington, Caleb Williams from USC, Cam Rising from Utah. Like there's a lot of good quarterbacks. I think DJU at Oregon State is not going to be I think he's going to kind of revitalize. Like, look at the Pac-12. This is, I mean, if you're an Oregon fan, I think you're thrilled. Like, this is going to be one of the most exciting Pac-12s, and we talk about it a lot. I mean, there's 4 teams that I think have a legitimate argument to be top 10, top 15 teams from the Pac-12. It's going to be loaded. You're going to have to win. You're going to have to beat good teams, and I think Oregon is certainly up to the task. Dan Lanning is obviously used to playing in and out brutal schedules from Georgia. So, again, I'm excited for this Oregon team. Wanted to jump on, talk a little bit about what I saw from this Oregon team in the spring game, and can't thank you guys enough for the support. Over 5,000 subscribers again is absolutely surreal. So if you do enjoy the content, lock in, subscribe to the channel. I think we'll be talking some recruiting later on for the Oregon Ducks as well. So we appreciate the support, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.